In this video, we're going to be going over the full process of setting up your sales funnel inside of Zoho CRM. So it's going to cover everything from, lead statuses, automations around those, managing conversion, the entire deal flow, and then a little bit of reporting on the back end, just so I can show you how to set up a nice looking funnel that's going to give you an understanding of how things are moving through your processes. So before we jump in, I do want to ask, if you find this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. And if it does spark kind of the need to talk to somebody like us and get some help building out your Zoho installation, just head on over to zenatta.com, click on book a meeting, and then we'll be chatting about how we can help in no time. So without any further ado, let's jump on in. So here we are inside of Zoho CRM. And again, our goal here is to walk through how to actually set up your flow and build the system to match your actual sales funnel. So as we look at leads and as we look at deals, there's a few fields that I really want to highlight that are very important for funnel management. One of those inside of leads is going to be this lead status, right? So we have this set up just as the default options right now, but really this lead status are each of those steps in that funnel that you're looking to build out should have a matching lead status. Another one that I will just highlight here is our lead source. We're going to talk a little bit about assigning leads as they get created. Lead source is what we're going to use in our example. Overall, it's just a really important thing to be tracking to make sure that as you're looking at your different funnels, you can identify, hey, if leads are coming from source A, they're actually moving through the funnel better than if they're coming from source B. And if you're like a sales leader, if you can give some of that information back to your marketing team, they're going to love you. So just make sure that this is kind of part of your flow to be tracking that lead source. As we look at the deals, on the other hand, they're going to be primarily based on this stage value, right? So we've got these different deal stages that can be associated with different pipelines. And these are essentially going to be the steps of your funnel as you're actually looking at it from the perspective of a deal once it's converted over from that lead. So with that in mind, how would we actually go about setting these up inside of the CRM? So let's go one by one. We're going to start with the leads. So if we go into settings and we open up modules and fields, and then we jump into the leads module, and we'll go just into our standard layout. In our case, we just have the one. This lead status field can be customized under this edit properties option. And then within here, we can go in and actually set up, what are these actual stages and steps that go into configuring our lead flow, right? So in our case here, this is just our default. It's like, hey, we've not contacted them. We've attempted. They asked for us to talk to them later. They've been contacted or they've been lost or qualified. And so as we look at these, what we may want to do is do things like rearrange them. So for me, I would think like not contacted up top, and then attempted, and then later, and then contacted. Here we can also add new options as well. So we could say something like qualified. If this is the lead that we've talked to who we think is actually a good fit, we can always add different statuses to actually track those. Over here on the right, these are what they'll call forecast categories. So really 3 different types. You either have an open lead, a not qualified lead, meaning like you talk to them and they're just not a good fit, or a junk lead. This is like a spam submission of your form or whatever it may be for you. Now, one little tip that I do want to give here, and I'll show you how it applies, is as you're looking at your lead funnel, you want to figure out which ones of these steps are going to be important for my reporting. And so in this case, I'm looking at contacted here, and it's like, that's the first big step, right? A lead is created. First thing we want to do is get a hold of them, right? And then make that determination of if they're qualified or not. So as we look at some of those statuses and we identify which ones are the most important, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll actually add to my lead what I call the timeline information. And this timeline information section can be filled out with various dates, like the contacted date, that are going to mark those really important steps in our funnel. And the reality is that when you're looking at a lead, you can, in fact, review the lead status history if you have that activated. So if we were to go back to our little, lead tracking here, under our status and under our edit properties, we can turn on history tracking, and it'll kind of give you like a little table that says, hey, on this date, it entered this status. On this next date, it entered another. The reality is, while those are useful, they're a bit trickier to use for our reporting when we actually get into building out like a funnel or a pipeline report. So I'm going to add this date field, and then when we get into the workflows section of this video, I'll actually show you how to automatically stamp that date so that you don't need to manually fill it in, but you still get the benefit of having it available for your reporting. Now, next one here is looking at our deals, and I do want to highlight that there's kind of two places that stage customization can live for your deal records. One of those is just here within the default layout, right? We can go ahead and add like any of the available stages that might be needed for a particular deal. And astute viewers may notice that this list here that I'm showing doesn't really match what you're seeing on this deal that I opened up earlier, right? This is kind of like an abbreviated pipeline. The reason for that is that there's another option that sits on top of our stages when we're customizing our deals, and that functionality is called pipelines. So under our customization settings, we have pipelines. What you'll see here for me in my deal pipelines is that I have two. I have a B2B, and then I have a B2C. And so if you are the type of business that might actually be selling into different types of groups or different organizations, as well as selling direct to customers, you might have different pipelines. Similarly, if you sell into different industries and maybe like, hey, industry A, a lot of those are pretty quick little easy sales. Industry B, we've got to talk to more people. These are bigger projects. There's a lot more determination. Then you'll go ahead and just add a new pipeline for that example pipeline, right? So we can just add this and then determine which stages are relevant for this one in particular, right? So we can add those, go ahead and save it. And then there it is. We've got our new pipeline based on different sets of stages. Now, in my case, I'm going to delete this one. That's just a quick example. We're going to work more on these two that we just have here for our example today. But just to close that out, essentially, we can come to this standard layout and we can add any stages that we need, right? So if we need a new stage, we can add those here. And then we can set what the probability to close, whether this is open, won, or lost, and then this forecast category as well for each of these different stages that we're working with. Now, similarly to my lead, how I showed you creating that timeline information, I do also love to do that for my deals. And so if I were to go in and look, let's say at our B2B pipeline, a really important step in that is when did we send them a proposal or a quote? So maybe I want to add a date field for our proposal date. And so I can go ahead and do that here, and then I'll click Save and Close. And so just like that, using the lead status, the deal stages, and the pipelines, you can very easily set up what those big picture steps and stages are that are a part of your flow. So for the next part of the walkthrough, what we're going to do is jump into some workflow automation so that I can show you some of the really common things that you're going to set up as a part of that sales funnel. Let's jump over to our workflows and get started. So under automation and workflow rules, if you've seen some of our videos on CRM, you will know that workflow rules are kind of like the workhorse behind the scenes for a lot of CRM automation. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you a few different things. First, I'm going to show you running a workflow when a lead is created. This is oftentimes done to send some type of confirmation to that lead, assign it to different users, and kind of kick off the beginning of the process. Then I'm going to show you how to do a couple of those date stamps so that as a lead is moving through your funnel, you're getting easy points of data that you can use to track and report on that process. And then we'll also show some of the tasks and email automation that's really commonly used to speed up process through your funnel. So let's start with the lead. So let's create a new rule and we'll call this our lead assignment. And then we'll call it on create. And this is something that you want to be in a good habit with early is give these workflows a name that's informative where, hey, this is going to do our lead assignment and it's going to trigger on creation of that lead. So if we click next, we'll get to this workflow page. Here, what we're going to do is decide what do we want to trigger this workflow on? Is this something that's done based on an action, based on a date, maybe a note being added or a particular score threshold being hit? In our case, we're going to do a record action and we're going to trigger it on creation. Now, here's where you get into some of the nitty gritty, right? Where based on a lead being created, we might want to take different actions based on certain field options that are a part of that lead. And so if a lead gets created and the source is contact us, well, we might want to do different things than if a lead gets created and the source is employee referral, let's say, right? The employee referral might not need a confirmation email. They might not need to be assigned, right? Because the person who created it should keep it. And so in here, what we can do in our workflows is a whole bunch of different things, but we're going to focus in on a few important ones. So here, what we'll do is if a lead is created and that source is contact us, we could go ahead and assign it to a particular user, right? So we could say, hey, we're going to assign this directly to a user based on that. We could also set it as multiple users, and it's going to round robin them through those different users. We can assign them based on particular criteria. This is a really nice one. So you might want to say, hey, round robin this through the sales users when it comes in from the contact us page, right? Really common, no code needed, just going to handle this for you. Down at the bottom, one little note, you generally want to select these open tasks, meetings, and calls. What this is saying is that if a lead was created, and let's say you had a workflow that was going to create the task for that lead on creation, maybe that runs first. And so you just want to make sure that anything that's related to your lead gets assigned to that new user as it's being created and assigned via this workflow. Other things you might want to do is like send email notifications. So maybe I want to send some type of welcome email. I want to send it to the email on file for that lead. And then I'll go ahead, I'm just grabbing an example template here, and save and associate. And so now when a lead gets created, what's going to happen is it's going to round robin through our sales team, and it's going to send them an email confirmation saying, hey, thanks for your interest. Our sales team's going to reach out to you soon. So I'll go ahead and save that. Now, there are more workflows that we're actually going to create. So we're going to make another here for our leads. We'll call this our timeline information on our updates. And now here, we're going to use record action again, but in this case, we're going to run this on some edits to a specific field, right? And so here, what we can basically say is when our lead status gets updated to certain values, do certain things, right? So if our lead status is updated to, let's say, contacted, we're going to accomplish a few automated actions. So in this case, one, we might run a field update and say, stamp contacted date, let's say. And then here, what we'll do is say, when we hit this particular stage, set our contacted date to the date that this update occurred, right? And so what that's going to do is, if you remember back on my lead, how I added that little date field, when I hit that stage, a user's not going to need to fill this in, right? Because the reality is they might forget, they might be busy, stuff happens, right? And so we're going to actually just stamp it for them. Another thing that we might do here is maybe create a task and maybe want to delay it and say, hey, you know what? 2 days after they've been contacted, if they're still a lead, right, and they haven't been converted, maybe we want to assign a task and say, follow up on interest, for example. Because one thing you want to do as you're building out a funnel in here is make sure that if there are places where your deals or leads might go to die, like, hey, you had that good phone call with them, maybe we need to now set up a follow-up meeting or whatever happens next for you. Figure out those opportunities where you can go ahead and create these little prompts, these tasks, these auto emails to make sure that things are going to keep moving forward. Right? So now I can say, hey, when this lead gets updated to this contacted status, I want to stamp the date and queue up a follow-up in 2 days where we're going to chase that lead down and make sure that they're being properly worked. So here, I'll go ahead and click save. One thing I will highlight is that as you are working through these different workflows, you can make them have different criteria. So I could actually use one workflow to accomplish different things. Right? So maybe if it was like contact in the future, you might want to automatically set some future contact date in that timeline information. And so you can just use one workflow to accomplish many different task items, as long as you're intentional about those criteria and those processes. And so now, if I were to go into a lead, let's say, and maybe I were to update this lead status to contacted, we should see a couple things happen. So when I've made that update, we'll see right away this contacted date gets filled in with the current dates. And if I look in the timeline, we'll see that this workflow did in fact run to update that. One last little trick I'll show you here is that under this upcoming automated actions, we can see that that delayed task creation is queued up and it's going to happen in the future. Now, as we think about our deals, we'll have a lot of similar workflows that are going to trigger there. So I'm going to give a quick example. We'll call this our timeline information for our deals. Because as you'll remember, we did want that particular update to occur where I get that proposal sent date. So we're going to say, hey, when our stage gets updated, and as that stage is updated to proposal and price quote, just like we did with the leads, we're going to create a field update that says, stamp proposal date, right? So I have that set. I can just make it the execution date, and then I'll click on Save and Associate. And so again, what you're going to be thinking about as you are building your pipeline is, one, what are those steps and stages that go into it? What are the meetings we need to have? What are the documents that they need to sign off on, right? And then you're going to convert those into your lead and deal stages. Then what you're going to do is for each of those stages, determine what needs to be done and what are those next step actions that move us towards the next profitable stage, right? So if we know that after we've had meeting 1, we need to schedule meeting 2 to close the deal, make sure that you have those tasks and emails and reminders going out to encourage us to get to that next step and next stage. With those initial pieces of configuration done, what we're now going to do is jump into the CRM analytics, and I'm going to show you how to actually build a simple funnel report that'll help you track these statuses. I really wanted to make sure that I fit this piece in because I think that these are a little non-obvious on how you use them, and so I wanted to give an example. So as we're looking at our analytics and our dashboards here, there are a bunch of different options. What we're going to use is a funnel. And really the special sauce with these different funnel reports is, as you'll notice, they can pull data from different modules at different steps and points in time, right? And so we can see here in this funnel chart that they have, we have data from our leads as well as our data from our deals, right? And so if we scroll down, we're going to use this nice little funnel here just because I like how it looks. All of these essentially are going to work about the same way. So if we open up our funnel, this is going to be, we'll call it our lead to deal pipeline. And we're going to create these via stages. And so each of these stages should essentially be one of those big picture steps that you care about tracking, right? So you might determine, we give a lead 5 calls, and then they're either going to be contacted or they're going to be junk. I would advise that you don't have a funnel stage and a status for call 1, call 2, call 3, call 4, right? Let the workflow automation handle the management of those repetitive calls. And we're just tracking, they've not been started, we're trying to call them, and we've contacted them. Just so that your funnel looks good, right? And you're actually able to see it and kind of understand where things are at in those processes. So here we'll say, we're going to look at leads that have been created. We're going to base that duration based on the created time. And then let's say we want to look at data for like this year, right? So I'm early in January. This would be kind of like an early start to our year of data. Or maybe we'll look at a previous year just so it's a little more accurate. But so here, what we can do is actually, I'm going to do a custom and we'll just say from, we'll go just July forward. So I'll set this to next year. So now I have stage 1 is going to be the leads created within a certain period of time. Then what I can look at is maybe our leads contacted, right? So because we're on step 2, it's going to start asking you, hey, should this be a report of leads converted to something? I'm saying right now, no. I want to have 2 stages that are a part of just my leads module. But here, what I can do is actually say, give me a list of the leads where the contacted date is not empty. Right? And so it's going to apply this previous filter. So what are the leads that were created from July 1st that have been contacted, right? And so this is one of those reasons that I really, really love to use the date stamps, because they give you two things, right? They give you the fact that something occurred, right? They give you that binary flag. If it's filled in, it happened. If it's not filled in, it didn't happen. But then they also give you the context of when did it happen. So they kind of have that dual usage that I really love. So now let's look at the next one. Let's say we want to do leads converted. Here we'll say leads that get converted to contacts. And then if we wanted to have a criteria filter, we surely could. In this case, I don't think that we need it. So now out of our three stages, we have our leads created, we have the leads that have been contacted, and then we have the leads that have actually been converted. So you can kind of see, hey, we're starting to look like funnel, right? These are those core things that we want to be able to track. So now let's say we want to look at leads converted as well as our deals created, right? So again, I can go ahead and just create a new module or a new tracking stage and add that in. And here what I'm doing is I'm really just using that related module. So I'm saying, hey, I want to see leads converted to contacts that have a deal related to them, because maybe not all of your leads get converted into deals right away. You might turn them into contacts, market to them a little bit more, and then they wake up as a deal. If that's not your flow and they go straight to deal every time, you could go ahead and just do this as one step, right? And include those deals here. I'm just thinking about the most robust platform or kind of strategy that we can have. So I'm going to split those into two. Now I'll add another for proposals sent. Again, this is kind of back to why I love those date stamps so much. I can do that same thing here and say, hey, give me a list of all of those proposals where the proposal date is not empty, because then we know that this is something that actually occurred, right? So here, I see that we've kind of run into our cap. It looks like there's a cap of 5 for this particular type of funnel. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of leads converted. We're just going to create this as deals created. This is going to be converted to contacts with a related deal. And then I'll just add that proposals sent back in here just to make sure that we don't lose that step. So proposal date, again, is not empty. Then last but not least, maybe we want to have one for deals closed won, right? This is that magic step that we want to get to. This is the whole point. So we can say, hey, wherever that stage is, closed won, we'll click on done. And just like that, we have our funnel configured. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. Again, now this is in my demo account, so we don't have a ton of data, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. So if we were to grab our lead and convert it, give this a new name just so I can save it. So now we'll go ahead and just open up this dashboard. We see that we've got our report here. Let's actually move something through our process and see what changes and what updates, right? So I've got this analytics report. I have one lead that's been created and one that's been contacted. That's this guy right here. So let's convert him over to a deal. We're just going to create a deal as part of this conversion. We're going to forecast that future date. And then we'll go ahead and click convert. So let's open up that deal. This is going to be, again, where a lot of this work is going to happen from here on out. If we give this a refresh, we should now see 1 in our deals created, but we haven't yet sent that proposal, right? So it's not open into that stage yet. But let's say we're working through our flow and we end up getting to that proposal and price quote stage. Now what we should see is we've got this task that got created. That's just due to one of our workflows. We have that proposal date that just got filled in automatically. So if I go back to analytics and I click on refresh, there it is. I've now got another. So now it's 1 in that proposal sent. And then last but not least, hey, they signed it. We win. Awesome. Let's go ahead and do a closed won. Looks like we have a couple conditionally required fields that need to be filled in. So now that this is closed won, when I come back in and refresh it, I now have a deal closed won that's set to 1. We also note with these that they're going to calculate your conversion between each of these steps. Keep in mind as you're working with these that it's all going to be based on this here, this initial duration that you have set up, right? Because it's tracking essentially one record, right, through each of these steps. Even though we think about it as a lead, a contact, and a deal, really it's kind of one thing from the perspective of this report. So it's only going to be looking at leads that were created within this time period. And so yeah, as we see, we've got this one lead, but if I go into my leads module, you see, well, I do have a lot of others. These are just really old, right? This is like some of the demo data probably created 2 years ago, so it's not factoring into this report. Now, outside of that, there are a bunch of different types of these funnel reports that you can use, right? Just based on your particular preference. They're going to just work differently based on how you want to slice things. This one at the top, we do use pretty commonly because you can cut it based on another parameter, right? So as you notice with this funnel, it's kind of just one big funnel, right? If you wanted to see funnels by different states or maybe by different lead sources, you could use this region-wise conversion instead, which is just going to give you a more detailed ability to slice and dice that data. I think with that, we are all good here for today. We've gone through customizing the status and stages, working with pipelines, some of the workflow automation that will be important, and then the reporting and trackability of that flow once you have it set up. As always, I do really hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. That really does help us out. If it sparks any questions, feedback, or additional video requests, leave those down in the comment section right below that like button, as we do try to read and respond to as many of those as we can get to every single week. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.